You know, when you hear the name Davy Crockett, a certain image just pops right into your head, doesn't it? The coonskin cap, the tall tales about wrestling bears. But the man behind that towering legend, the real king of the wild frontier, well, he was wilder, funnier, and a whole lot more human than you can possibly imagine. And really, there's only one person who can tell his story the right way, and that's the man himself. So let's go ahead and pull up a log by the fire and let Davy Crockett tell his tale, in his own words. This, right here, this wasn't just some catchy phrase for Davy Crockett. Nope. This was the absolute core of his being. You could say it was the compass that guided his entire life. A life that took him from the deep, untamed wilderness all the way to the halls of power in Congress, and then finally to a dusty old fort in Texas. Think about it. This was a young America, a country that was itself constantly going ahead, always pushing its boundaries into the unknown. Crockett's personal motto? It was like a perfect reflection of that national spirit. It was the engine that drove him, plain and simple.
So Crockett started to get tired of all the wild stories and political pamphlets that were twisting his life into something he barely recognized. He decided he was going to set the record straight. He picked up a pen and wrote his own autobiography. So for this explainer, we're going straight to the source. We're going to dive into the book he called A Plain, Honest Homespun Account, just to hear the story from the one man who actually lived it. And that story, it doesn't start with a big roar or legendary feat. It starts with hardship. See, long before he was this legend who could conquer the wilderness, he was just a boy that the wilderness nearly conquered, a kid who was forced to grow up with blistering speed in a situation that would forge the very resilience he'd become so famous for. I want you to try and picture this for a second. You're 12 years old, your own father has basically rented you out to a total stranger, a cattle drover named Jacob Seiler. Your job? To help drive a herd of cattle 400 miles from home. Now, 400 miles back in the 1790s, that might as well have been the distance to the moon. This wasn't some grand boyhood adventure. It was a business transaction. And young David was just stranded, surrounded by strangers with no clear way to get back home. And this quote, this just reveals the raw, honest truth of a little boy who's so far from home. You see, this was no fearless wild child born tough as leather. He was a homesick kid. He was scared. He would lie awake night after night, the faces of his family just burned into his memory, completely torn between what he was supposed to do and this deep, powerful longing for home. It's this vulnerability right here that makes his later grit so absolutely remarkable. The legend, you could say, was built on the foundation of a boy who just really missed his mom. So what did he do? Well, he did what he would end up doing for the rest of his life. He went ahead. On a freezing cold morning, while his master was fast asleep, he slipped out into the pitch-black darkness. A blizzard had just covered the ground in 8 inches of fresh snow. There was no road to see, no path to follow at all. He had to navigate just by the faint outline of the trees against the pre-dawn sky, wading through snowdrifts that came all the way up to his knees, his heart just pounding with every single step. This was so much more than just running away. This was a declaration. This was the first great act of defiance from a boy who simply refused to be broken. And that boy's grit? Well, that would soon become the stuff of legend. You really can't talk about Davy Crockett without talking about his life as a hunter, because this is where the man and the myth truly become one. He wasn't just, living in the wilderness. He was an absolute master of it, a man who could read the forest like a book and face down its most dangerous creatures.
10. That's the number. 10 bears. That's how many Crockett claimed he killed in a single spring, after moving his family to a new piece of land. In a place that wild, bear meat wasn't some kind of trophy. It was dinner. So this number, it's not a tall tale. It's a testament to his incredible skill and the dangerous reality of just trying to provide for your family on the very edge of civilization. It establishes his credentials way better than any legend ever could.
All right, so let's get into one of those stories, straight from the man himself. He's out hunting for supper, shouldering the turkeys he'd already shot. The day is kind of winding down. And then, suddenly, his pack of hunting dogs, they catch a scent and just explode into this frenzy of barking, tearing off through the woods. And Crockett, he knows that sound. This is no turkey chase. Something big is out there.
So he drops the turkeys and just follows the sound, crashing through thickets and over fallen logs. The chase seems to go on forever, deeper and deeper into the forest, until finally he bursts into a clearing, and his dogs are going absolutely wild, just leaping and barking at the base of this massive tree. And when Crockett looks up, his eyes tracing the trunk up into the high branches, he sees it. Now, listen to Crockett's own words here. A huge bear is coming down the tree, not to escape, but to fight his dogs. That detail, that is everything. See, Crockett had seen countless bears in his life, but they were almost always running away, scrambling for safety. This one was different. This one was an aggressor. This moment, it just brilliantly illustrates the raw, unpredictable danger of the frontier. It was a spectacle, a battle of beast versus beast, and Davy Crockett was standing right in the middle of it.
But Crockett's greatest weapon wasn't always his rifle. Turns out the same keen observation, the perfect timing, and the common sense that made him a master hunter, well, it also made him a surprisingly sharp politician. He took that backwoods wit with him right onto the campaign trail, and it served him just as well as any bear dog. So in this race, Crockett was the classic underdog. I mean, he was running against this powerful, polished man, a major general, and the state's attorney general. And then there's Crockett. He shows up in his hunting clothes. He'd openly mock his opponent's profession, joking that while the general was an expert in law trick, he himself was better known for war work. I mean, the contrast couldn't have been more stark.
So the scene is a political rally. Crockett's opponent is standing on a stump just droning on and on with this long, formal speech, probably putting the entire crowd to sleep. And just as the afternoon heat is at its worst, a large flock of guinea fowls just wanders into the clearing, completely unaware that they're about to change the course of an entire election.
Now, if you've ever heard guinea fowls, you know they make an incredible racket. Crockett called it the most unmerciful chattering that ever was heard. The noise was so overwhelming that it just completely drowned out the general. He sputtered, he tried to shout over them, and finally he had to stop and demand that someone please drive the birds away. And the crowd, who were bored just moments before, they just erupted in laughter.
And in that moment of pure chaos, Crockett saw his opening. He just sauntered right up to his flustered opponent, and loud enough for the whole crowd to hear, he delivered the knockout punch. Then he turns to the roaring crowd and tells them the fowls were just crying out, "Crockett, Crockett, Crockett." With one perfectly timed, witty remark, he turned a random interruption into a political triumph. It proved that a quick wit was way more powerful than a long speech. But politics, well, like the frontier, it's a fickle and dangerous place. And when Crockett was finally defeated in a bitter election, he didn't retreat or retire. No, that wasn't his style. He was a man who was defined by the horizon, and when one path closed, he simply turned his eyes to the next and final frontier of his life. After a crushing loss, one that he blamed on the political machine of his rival Andrew Jackson, Crockett famously told his former constituents, "You may all go to hell, and I will go to Texas." See, for a man like him, an ending was never just an ending. It was always a new beginning. He always needed a wilderness to conquer, and with Tennessee becoming more and more civilized, he just looked west.
This verse, from a book he wrote about his journey, it just says it all. It is pure Crockett. When politics and society get too messy, you don't stay and complain. You grab your rifle, your fluke, as he called it, and you start fresh. You cut your ties and you go ahead. It was the exact same philosophy that drove that 12-year-old boy out into the snow, and now it was leading a 49-year-old man toward a fateful destiny at the Alamo.
You know, Davy Crockett was so determined to tell his own plain, honest, homespun story, but his life was just so large, so intertwined with the very spirit of his time, that the man and the myth, they just became inseparable. His journey from the backwoods to the battlefield is really the story of America itself, a story of restless movement, rugged individualism, and that endless search for a new frontier. And it kind of leaves us wondering, doesn't it? Where does the real person end, and where does the larger-than-life legend truly begin?